Brothers of the shining moon, heaven, earth, and sea, I call upon you in this hour, bring magic unto me. Brothers, oh, the cauldron cries, it singeth unto me the songs of Mother Goddess and of Father in the tree.
Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we are off adventuring into the spaces between, being broadcast live on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live, and on YouTube World. So, hello, everyone. And if you are listening in on YouTube, make sure you do hit that like button. This is the thumbs up one. Make sure you hit that one. And no matter how you are hearing me, just make sure you do stop in and say hello. And I want to thank you for joining me here on my spiritual journey. And I hope that you'll keep coming back and learning with me. And if you want to support the show, I do have a PayPal link if you wanted to do a donation thingy. It's on my header bar somewhere in there, and then also got the website. It is www.thespacesbetween.live. So looks like we do have some folks in the chat areas. So it looks like we've got Cracking and Renee and Brent over on TFR. And because Renee is an overachiever, it looks like you are in YouTube land also, along with Linda and Don, or Aether Archives, and Jessica Mink. So hello, and Cameron. Yes, thank you for joining. And thank you, Linda. She just said she likes my lessons. So I appreciate that. I like getting the feedback. I periodically get an email too, which I try to respond to those. If I don't, email me again and poke at me a little bit. Just a little. Also, the call lines are open tonight, so if you have anything you'd like to share, any thoughts or, opinions on what we're talking about, by all means, give me a call. It's 213-233-3998, or if you are across the pond in the UK, it is 44203-393-2871. And if you do call and I don't respond right away, say something in the chat room, just because I'm flying solo tonight. And I've got my heat pack, and I've got my ginger ale, my water, and my mint tea. I am just feeling kind of Saturday morning-ish rather than Saturday evening-ish, which is kind of frustrating, but it's all good. Thank you, Jessica, for the happy birthday. So, yesterday we talked about some of the more macabre side of being a pagan and witchcraft and such. A little bit about voodoo and Satanism and such, and what a cult really is. And it was really interesting to me to research it, because generally people hear the word occult and they think, ooh, scary, scary, bad, bad. In reality, that's not what a cult is. So, just real quick, the definition of a cult, in case you didn't know, is that, hold on, scrolling. Supernatural, mystical, or magical beliefs, practices, or phenomena. A secret society kind of a thing. The occult is a category into which varied beliefs and practices are placed if they're considered to fit into neither religion nor science. And so things like ufology, believing in UFOs, that kind of thing, that would be a cult. And also, if you are Catholic, and during Mass, if you you take part in communion, technically the act of communion is an occultic ritual, just by the very definition of the occult that even the church subscribes to. So I thought it was interesting, just really, really interesting to learn about that, and more about voodoo. Now, just like any other religion, or tradition, there's also the dark side. I mean, there's extremists in no matter what path or tradition you are in. But generally speaking, most people aren't. So, like the folks who practice voodoo are actually pretty community minded, pretty friendly, social warriors, if you will. And it's only just because of Hollywood, really, and society and fear and racism for the most part, that voodoo is anything that people fear. So yeah, it just is really really interesting to learn about that. So last night we ended talking about the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, and some of the history behind it and the traditions, which I thought were interesting also. I had no idea about some of that. And so I figured, from Day of the Dead, we'd go and talk about a dumb supper. Now, for those that, don't really know what a dumb supper is, it's a way to honor the dead with, and it doesn't mean stupid, it means dumb. Like once upon a time, dumb was the word to describe someone who wasn't able to speak for whatever reason. So, a dumb supper means a silent supper. And now the origins of this particular tradition have been just really, really well debated. There's nobody really knows where it came from. Some say it's ancient cultures. Some believe it's a new idea. But regardless, it's kind of being recognized and a practice that's being used by many different traditions around the world. And just a dumb supper honors loved ones who have passed on, basically, in a nutshell. It's very similar to a memorial. And it's often, as a silent event, it's often touching and invigorating as well as relaxing, depending on your mindset going into it. And it's just really a really great way to remember those that we have lost, as well as inviting the god or the goddess or the spirits to join you as the guest of honor. And it's a very formal, often solemn ritual. And it may be for those who have been deceased in the previous year or over time. And in a way, even the Dia de los Muertos is a variation of this because they honor all of their dead, not just the ones that have passed in the last year. Now, some sources do say that this particular tradition originated in the Ozarks or the Appalachians. They say that once upon a time, or it was thought, or even now, if you have a dumb supper, like it was organized by women generally, and anybody was invited, and if a man came in and sat down next to a woman, that's who was probably going to get married in the coming year. So, but generally nowadays, it's just also a way to celebrate Samhain, the Sabbath that occurs this time of year on the wheel of the year here in the northern hemisphere. And it's generally associated with the spirits of the dead. And so Jessica just asked, didn't they dig them up and celebrate their ancestors? Kind of grisly. Yes, it is kind of grisly. And that's not necessarily a Mexican tradition. It's one, I think, more Central America. I'm not quite sure which tradition it is where they actually will dig up their ancestors and wrap them in new clothes and bindings and such, and carry them through the town, and it's just a big party. And it's just a lot. The relationship with death is different in other traditions and other cultures. And it's something Don and I were talking about last night on the show. Is the U.S. generally speaking seems to be very afraid of death, and to the point where it's not spoken about. It's people just don't seem to want to accept that death happens to all of us eventually. It will happen. And so it is a little weird. I get it, but death, something happen. It's just the other side of the coin. Just like if the coin is the path, there's the left side, the right side, either both sides of the coin. And with life, there is death, both sides of the same coin, as your spirit is the coin. And so it's just a part of what we have to do. It's a part of the cycle of life is to die. And that's okay. So, other cultures outside of the U.S. often embrace death in just a very, very different way. Often they celebrate the death because it's a celebration of the end of this experience and moving on to the next experience, whether it's a reincarnation or the next level of karma or any of those things. Yeah, it's the circle of life. It really is. And so the dumb supper is kind of a way to, celebrate a life that has been well lived in a way. And so why hold a dumb supper for Samhain? Well, traditionally, Samhain is when the veil between our world and the spirit world is at its thinnest, its most fragile. And so it's the night that we know, or we're pretty doggone sure, that the dead will hear us speak and maybe even speak back to us. So it's a time of death and resurrection, of new beginnings, and often fond farewells. So, I'm going to say this now, I'm going to say it again later. There's really no right way to hold a dumb supper. It's, what your time and energy and space, all of that, you have available. So rituals like the dumb supper may seem odd or cryptic to the casual observer, but it's just another way to find a meaningful way to acknowledge our silent thoughts and feelings about the subject of death, both our own, sorry about that, and the death of those that we love, the people that we spend time with. And death is just a hard part of life for us. So often we sweep it away and shove it into the back of our soul, back of our minds, and we let the cobwebs collect and we ignore it. And this can lead to mourning, not just for now. It may still be mourning, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road. You just don't let it go. So Samhain is perhaps a really good time then to pull our grief out, shake it off, dust it off, and air it and the darkness that we feel with it with other people who care about us. That's why we have a group, dinner. So now, generally speaking, I do recommend, trying to include your children as much as possible. When it comes to a dumb supper, though, it's probably best suited for adults, older teenagers, partly because death is often a confusing topic for kiddos. They may not understand it completely. And, as a supper can last, 30 to 40 minutes, expecting your kiddos to be silent the entire time without technology is often very hard. Shoot, as adults, we have a hard enough time being silent for an hour. Oh my gosh. So, for those that you invite to attend your dumb supper, you want to make sure they understand in advance that it's an event that will be done in complete and total silence. And that silence really heightens your senses, and it can often cue attendees that you're trying to focus on the invisible world. And so make sure that no one's speaking. So you as the host then means you have to take a little bit extra care. You need to be anticipating your guests' needs without them saying anything. And depending on how big your table is and how many guests you have attending, you want to make sure there's salt, pepper, butter, the condiments and such at every seating. Same with extra water, maybe extra silverware and napkins, that kind of thing. And but you also need to make sure that you've set the table in a way that's pretty self-explanatory. So it's obvious. And it's often quieter and requires less communication if the plates are already assembled and dressed and portioned out, rather than passing around bowls and such for everybody to eat out of, just so you're serving plates full of food already. So just also because allergies are real, make sure that people have already notified you of any different allergies or dietary requirements. And so again, you have to make sure people are aware that silence is necessary, because often if we're in a group setting, we get nervous and we chatter and we say things that have no meaning because we're trying to fill up the space, because we ourselves are afraid of silence as a group. So, make sure they know. But it's often kind of oddly relaxing to know that you're going to be spending time and having a ritual where you don't have to talk. There is no requirement to communicate verbally with anybody around you. And so you'll probably notice other things that you would normally miss. I mean, if you're so busy talking to your neighbor next to you, you might not see the subtle body language signs that some of the other participants might have, whether that's gestures or expressions or just internal thoughts that we normally don't stop and listen to while we're partaking. Now, whether you personally believe in the afterlife or whatever version of it, or if you want to just let go of someone who has passed or say goodbye to the lost one, it's just a really good opportunity to do that. So, if you do have animals around, they're generally pretty okay to let the animals roam in and out, partly because animals see things differently than we do, and often they are aware of the spirit world more than we are. So, remember, no talking the entire time the supper is being eaten. And from the time everybody enters the room where the supper is going to be, or the space where you're going to have it, there should be absolute silence. So, to begin with, set up your altar space or your table in a separate room or separate space that you're going to have this ceremony in. Have small candles on it that will be lit by each guest during the ceremony, and ask each guest to bring a memento or a picture of the deceased that they want to honor, and place it on the altar next to one of the candles. Now, the table should be set, and make sure you've got a place for each guest. And now you can do this one of two ways. You can have a setting for each of the deceased that you're honoring, or you can have kind of a communal setting or seating for each or for the group that you would like to honor. There should also be a setting at the head of the table for the god, the goddess, and the spirits that you want to attend. Now, the setting at the foot of the table is for the host or the hostess. And you may want to keep a separate table for, someone wants seconds or something like that, or extra beverages, extra silverware. So all of those bits and pieces are available, and people can just get up and go get them if they need them. And then when people attend, you'll want to have guests place the pictures on the altar, like I said, and then leave the room. And then the host will then enter the space, turn off the lights, and there will be some candlelight, because this is also done only by candlelight. You want it to be it'll feel pretty otherworldly, if you will, and but it's just really sets the mood, I guess, for the ceremony itself. The host will go into the room then, and bless the altar, and sage the space, and make sure the candles on the table are lit where everybody's going to be sitting, and then call upon the god and the goddess to join. And then as each guest re-enters the room, have them go clockwise, of course, and as they pass the altar, light one candle in honor of their loved one, and then approach the god and the goddess setting, and silently thank them for them joining. And remember, keeping it quiet and saying thank you. And then as each person is sitting down, make sure you do serve food to those that are deceased, so whatever setting you have for them, and also for the goddess and the god. And supper is eaten in silence, and so it's kind of a way to eat and meditate at the same time. And you can kind of have a timer going or what have you, so you kind of know when this should last, but about 40 minutes to an hour, depending on how much food you've got going on. No technology, though. No cell phones, no tablets, no recorders or anything like that. It is a quiet ceremony. And when everybody's done eating, um, remember those that you're honoring, and the special times that you shared, and allow those feelings to be absorbed into your psyche, into yourself, and remember that love and the blessings that you had with them. And then when everybody's done, you leave counterclockwise. You go past the seating for the god and the goddess, and you thank them again quietly for joining, and then you leave the room. And then once everybody's left, they can of course speak in a different room, and the host or the hostess is the very last to leave. And they thank the god and the goddess for joining, of course, silently. And then they, exit the room. You give the god and the goddess time to depart, and then you go back in and you snuff the candles out. You don't blow them out. You turn the lights on, of course, and you clean everything up. Now, afterwards, you can do some different things, afterwards, because often after the supper is a really great time for celebration. Because you've remembered the times that you've had with those loved ones, and now it's time to celebrate a bit. You can share any experiences you may have felt or thought or encountered during the supper with everybody during this time, or any messages you might have received from those that have passed. And you may want to, have a note or something that you would like to pass on to the spirit world. And if that's the case, you can burn it in like a bonfire if you're outside, or if you've got a candle specifically for this purpose on the inside, just make sure you have a cauldron for the embers to go into afterwards. Whatever you do, you can either often anoint your paper with Samhain herbs like cinnamon or ginger or cloves, that kind of thing. And you can also really get into the esoteric and do tarot readings or things like that. Maybe you want to draw a card for the person who's passed. Cautionary point: do not use a Ouija board. It is bad. Anyways, you could just, at this point, you're just, remembering those that have passed, and enjoying the experience, and remembering what has happened. And again, remember, there is no right or wrong way to hold a dumb supper. Just whatever is working best for you, whether it's you yourself. My grandmother drank a lot of tea, and so every so often I will just have a cup of tea, and I will set a setting for my grandmother, especially early in the morning, listening to the birds sing during the spring, especially. Oh my gosh. Speaking of tea. And it's just a great time to remember them. Now, the dead will speak to you when it is time for them to speak to you. At any time. It doesn't have to be just at Samhain. If you walk into a room and you're reminded of someone who has passed on, maybe you catch a whiff of perfume or a smell that you might associate with them, that means they're there and they're ready to talk to you. You can speak to them at any point, not just during certain ceremonies. You don't have to have a fancy formal ritual to speak to the dead. If they're there, they are listening to you. For some of us, they may be face palming a lot, but they're still there. It's all good. So, anyways, so that's basically a dumb supper in a lot of detail. Yes, Renee, it is kind of deep, but it's a way to connect that we don't often stop and think about. I know during for Memorial Day, often people will go and take flowers and leave them on the graves. They'll have ceremonies, that kind of thing. And I think that's good, but this is something you can do at any time of the year. Any time you might want to, acknowledge the passing of a loved one. Just during Samhain or Beltane, the veil is a little thinner. You might get a slightly different response than you would during the rest of the year. So, anyways, that's a dumb supper in a nutshell. Actually, it wasn't a nutshell. It's kind of a big, long bit. But, it's, I don't know. I think sometimes that, especially those of us here in the U.S., we we often forget that there are ways to honor the dead that don't involve going to funerals or memorials that are traditional, go to the funeral home or the church. There are other ways to celebrate the passing of life, or a wake for for that matter. Not really my thing. I don't want to go to a wake, but it could happen. So looks like we've got Naysay and Monster, Mog Monster in the chat now too. So hello, and mint tea. It's good stuff. Anyways, so we are already at the bottom of the hour. And again, if you want to call in after we come back, that number is 213-233-3998, or in the UK it's 44203-393-2871. If you want to send me an email, that's good too. It's wildpaisley@gmail.com. That's wildepaisley@gmail.com. So we will be right back, guys.
Sisters of the shining moon, heaven, earth, and sea, I call upon you in this hour, bring magic unto me. Brothers, oh, the cauldron cries, sing it unto me. The songs of Mother Goddess and of Father in the tree.
Hello, my lovelies. This is Paisley Wild, and we are adventuring into the spaces between. So, thank you for joining me tonight. Just a quick reminder, the phone lines are open. The number is 213-233-3998. Or you can always email me at wildpaisley@gmail.com. That's WILDEPAISLEY@gmail.com. It's sad I actually have to look at that and read it, or else I misspell my own name. It happens. So, for those of you who may not know, tomorrow is full moon. Have you figured out what your intentions are that you're going to set for the full moon? Get your moon water out and all that. So yeah, it's a good time, active energy, and especially this close to Samhain and Beltane. Yep. So, we're talking about kind of some of the macabre side of things. Now, in reality, they're not very macabre. In truth, it's just society's interpretation of them, unfortunately, or the spin that Hollywood has given things. Because we all know that Hollywood is fake, but often there are people out there who just believe everything that Hollywood says. Yeah, the religion of Hollywood, as Don says. Yes. So, I figured we would talk a little bit about graveyard magic. Woo woo. So there's actually a book. It's called Graveyard Magic: A Witch's Guide, and it's it's an interesting book. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. So, why graveyards? I mean, seriously, and it's graveyard dirt and graveyards are magical. I mean, anybody. So, if y'all listen to Don and Brent on Paranormal Portal, you know that paranormal stuff happens in graveyards, like ghosts. And but yeah, they're magical for other reasons too. So cemeteries are very often considered a shared spiritual space that doesn't really necessarily belong to one religion or group, because death is something that we all have in common. Everybody dies, folks. And so no matter what words are said over a casket, we all return to Gaia, or the goddess and the god, in the end. Cross the veil. We all do. And so graveyards can often function as a very neutral religious space, or even a temple, if one is not available for us to practice in. I mean, it's very rarely do we have access to a permanent spiritual place. But, graveyards are there. Okay.
Do you know what else people encounter in graveyards? Just as an FYI.
Dirt.
Wendigo.
Wendigo?
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. Can you turn my headset up a little bit? Second knob.
Second knob. Sure. Oh, you don't want to bump the camera this time? Say when. Say when.
Now. Anyhow, so graveyards. Yes, Wendigo. There is a legend that says that Wendigo go to graveyards, dig up graves, and grab body ash and use it to work dark magic against whatever that is, whatever they want to use it at. There's also a legend that says Wendigo are people from the First Nations that have gone through a ritual to become a Wendigo consciously, and one of the requirements is to kill someone in their family as their dedication to this particular dark aspect. And they use graveyard dust and body ash as weapons.
Interesting. Why would you do that on purpose?
Some people are not well.
That is a huge understatement. Yes, Linda, that is Dawn. Yes, very much at you. Yeah, skinwalkers.
Skinwalkers have been said to do that as well. As a matter of fact, it was something Brent and I just talked about on one of the podcasts. So if you want to know more,
Yeah,
go there.
Here you are, plugging your podcast. Oh, yes, Linda, this is Don Longbeard. Yes.
It truly is.
Yep. So, Naysay asked a question. I'm not sure. I'm going to say it out loud because I'm not sure I understood it. So, today's alignment just before sundown. The moon rises, and just after sunrise tomorrow, the moon sets. So, what are my thoughts about the totality of hours for a month? Do you mean month, Naysay? I'm not sure. I'm not an exact person, so I don't know about the totality of hours. I tend to ebb and flow, I guess. I'm not very rigid on that part. So I don't know. I'd have to think about it and ponder it and then get back to you. So, getting back to what I'm talking about. There's lost my thought. So yes, there's metaphysical traits, of course, just kind of like what Dawn was talking about, that come with graveyards. So yes, they are kind of often quiet and sad while the world grows around them. There's also a stillness and a timelessness that are associated with graveyards. They often hold a very strong emotional energy, and that can be very attractive to visiting entities, both between the world of the living and the underworld or the spirit world. Personally, I gotta tell you, I like going for walks in cemeteries. I don't do it as often now since I live out in the country, but when I lived in town and cities and such, it was quiet. Not a lot of people went there. I didn't have to worry about some stray dog chasing me, or because people forget to leash their pets, or leash their people,
Dog
leash their people. Yeah. So, chat room. So yeah, it's just I don't know. I find them very, very, very peaceful for me personally. So often, if you're looking for a cemetery, you can find quaint little cemeteries just by driving around or traveling, especially in some of the older communities. Old churches and funeral homes often have burial plots attached, and some in the large cities are actually very historic, often with monuments to the city's heroes, or perhaps of villains, or other boring people that might have just donated a lot of money somewhere. That happens. Just if you're looking for cemeteries, you want to know where to go. Often your local photography club will have some tips and know where cemeteries are, because photographers do love to take pictures of cemeteries. Just be careful. There are some taboos that are often associated with taking pictures of headstones and such, so just be aware. So there are some spells that actually call specifically for graveyard dirt, and occasionally for very specific graveyard dirt. So if you're looking for like a revenge spell, you may want graveyard dirt from someone who has been murdered or has suffered a really calamitous death.
That is horrible.
Yeah, right? That's a big revenge thing. Or if you want to power like a get rich type of thing, maybe
dirty banker.
A dirty banker, rich man, yep. Or maybe a child's grave if you're looking to conceive.
Oh, okay.
It is a little bit macabre. I mentioned that at the very beginning.
But that's better than,
this is also, kind of, I have to say, this may be how, Rosemary's Baby happened. I don't know. So just be aware. Make sure your intentions are set appropriately before you do any of this. And just like all other cultural artifacts and places, burial sites can change over time. So, headstones from colonial periods might give different biographical details. Later ones might have simpler inscriptions. So just sometimes the deceased are actually in danger of being lost to time. Sometimes they're not. So sometimes regular people can become local legends, and pilgrimage sites can become really great places to get dirt for wish making and little rituals. They say you have dirt from Jim Morrison's grave in France. You are an odd duck.
Oh my goodness.
So
why do I not find that weird though?
I didn't say it was weird. I said he is an odd duck. So yeah, but very interesting. But there are some rules involved with being in cemeteries. So on the mundane side, often they'll be posted at the entrance. There may be a keeper on site, especially for some of the newer and commercially maintained burial grounds. And they should be, some of them are obvious and some are more common sense. Don't litter. That's kind of a duh. Don't plant or bury things. Don't vandalize things. Don't disturb mourners or other memorial services, because that is really in bad taste to walk up to an open grave where there's an active burial service happening and just grab a cup of dirt. It's not like knocking on your neighbor's door. Knock, knock, knock. Can I borrow a cup of dirt? You might get thrown out, and you may get some law enforcement called on you. Just be aware. And visiting hours are also something to consider as well. They're not always posted, but in many places, cemetery hours are covered by state laws or local ordinances, which is why if you are ghost hunting and you want to go to a cemetery in the middle of the night, you may want to talk with someone who actually is responsible for the cemetery and get permission to be there. Now, some people do decide to sneak into places just because they feel the rules don't apply to them. Just be careful. You may have to deal with the repercussions. And so there is a lot of ignorance, though, about witchcraft. Still, there probably will be in 10 years, just to be honest. And so caretakers may not be able to tell the difference between an itinerant witch, or someone who's there to, get some graveyard dirt, and a typical vandal who's there to just abuse the gravestones. So if they see you there and they think you're doing something naughty, they will probably call the cops on you. So just be aware. And there's nothing like really interrupting your magical ceremony with being handcuffed and escorted off with a trespassing charge. So there's other things. So I gotta tell you, just real quick, side note. In researching this a bit, I found a couple of different random things about what to do in a cemetery at night.
Oh God.
And one article was probably about the most inappropriate list of 10 things you could possibly do in a cemetery. Seriously. And I don't get it. I don't get any of that. I guess those are not my people. Because apparently cemeteries are also a good place for drug deals, random sex.
Who's going to tell on you?
Yeah, I don't know, but random sex encounters.
Other disgusting things.
Yeah, things like that. Maybe goth kids, getting drunk. Who knows? Maybe people running around saying, I'm a vampire. Who knows? People are weird. And there's also a lot of superstitions. With graveyards. So, don't point cameras at gravestones. If you step over a gravesite, you should probably apologize, honestly. Apparently it's bad luck to wear new shoes to a cemetery.
Is it?
Yep. Anything new, especially shoes. Don't whistle in a graveyard. You're actually tempting death.
And you're calling stick Indians.
Yeah, bad. Two bads. Leave coins on a grave as a token of respect. Don't yawn near a grave, or ghosts could enter your body. So that's an interesting old wives' tale there. Yep.
Wow.
So smelling roses when there are none around is often a sign that a benevolent spirit is nearby. And a person who takes something from a graveyard will return more than he took often, if you're doing it respectfully. So some of that is interesting. So if you're going to take some graveyard dirt, I would leave some coins on the headstone. I'm just, make it a fair exchange. So if you're in the cemetery doing stuff, make sure maybe develop a relationship with a guardian of the cemetery, because I know that a lot of, especially the older cemeteries, have guardians. Which, if you've listened to the Paranormal Portal at all, they've talked about that a few times. It may be a dog, it may be a person. And, make sure, when you enter a cemetery, set your attention, put your energy out there. It's like, hey, I'm here for good things. I'm not here to be naughty. I'm here to collect some dirt. I'm going to leave some coins, and say thank you and apologize for stepping on a grave. And, don't be afraid to open your senses just a little bit when you're in a graveyard. You never know what you're going to pick up. On that same note, be cautious about opening your senses, because you never know what you're going to pick up. So, I don't know that I would do this solo.
Right.
I would carry your protections with you.
Right.
And, graveyards are also kind of a temple, if you will, for those who are, their patron god or goddess is, someone of death or the underworld, like Hades or the Morrigan or even Hecate are often associated with death.
Or hell.
Yeah, or hell, Hel. And, practitioners of many forms of magic believe that the spirits of the dead can empower the spell work of the living. So if you're there, be aware. Yes. It's just interesting. You leave other offerings, not just coins, but flowers, liquor, tobacco is a good thing to leave also. So yeah, graveyards, dirt, stones, tree branches. Often if you follow a specific tradition, there are some rules governing the collection of those things. Don't take things that are not freely given. So don't take your hammer and chisel to the gravestones to take a chunk of rock. That would be bad. And be safe, graveyards are not unsafe places to work magic. They're not inherently dark or evil. They are a portal, though, and they often carry a certain magical power and certain risks, and you're likely to encounter negative or chaotic energies that you don't want to bring home with you. So, make sure you ground yourself after, ground and center, before and after. Surround yourself with your own protections. Scan your body for any attachments. If you've got someone with you to scan you afterwards, absolutely do it. If you're advanced in your abilities to scry or channel or do trance work or mediumship, maybe I would do it in a cemetery. But I wouldn't just do it as a rookie. That may not be the right place to practice. And remember, the spirits don't know everything just because they're bodiless. They don't necessarily obey orders from a spirit that you wouldn't obey from a person. So if you just get the random urge that someone's telling you to strip your clothes off and run naked through the graveyard, you don't have to listen to it, seriously. So spirits can be your allies and will act as gatekeepers if they support your work and what you're doing. They'll actually protect you somewhat. So anyways, be safe, be cautious, be courteous. And when you're done and you get home, yes, by all means, do a cleansing ritual to knock loose anything that might have attached to you.
Right. It amazes me how people think that if you're in a graveyard that it's all spooky and evil. There are many, 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 many good people that had good lives, led good lives, were good people, buried in cemeteries, just like there's probably, some people that were not so nice. So, it just depends on what your intention is when you're walking in there. Like you said, before you walk in, set your intention. So yeah, you're going to resonate towards whatever intention you put out there.
On that note, Naysay, if you really feel you need to get naked and roll through the graveyard and you've set your intention beforehand, I suppose you can just roll with it.
Roll with a ba-dum-bum.
But yeah, the use of magic graveyard dirt isn't that odd in most magical traditions. And often the dirt from a deceased person the dirt beneath the deceased person is often has more value than the dirt above the person.
So you're saying it's better to dig them up and get the stuff underneath?
Maybe collect it as they're being buried if there's someone close to you.
How is that? How
if
is
they're
that
close
charged?
to you?
How is that charged if the person hasn't actually been in the grave yet?
What
makes it more powerful if it hasn't been introduced to the energy of the person?
Dude, it's a cemetery. There's a lot of energy there. The specific person, I don't know. It varies with the different spells and what you're trying to work. You just think of the dirt is a physical representation of the person or the traits of the person that was buried there in general. So if you're trying to go for a certain trait from a certain person, yes, the dirt above them or around them, between their fingers, depending on how they're buried, sure. If you're trying to just connect with them a little bit more, that could be any of the dirt involved with the cemetery. In parts of graveyard or funerary bits and pieces have been used for a long time in just magic in general. Ancient texts indicate the ancient Egyptians may have used dirt and other items from funeral sites, like bones, for instance, as part of their magical practices. Especially when it came to cursing or necromancy.
Go figure.
Right. And so, actually, graveyard dirt can be used in magic and protection spells, and has often been, those have been documented in communities from Africa and the Americas both. So, just remember, you can just go off to your local cemetery with a bucket and a bag or a shovel and start scooping, but try to be respectful. Make sure you choose the right grave site. And it's better actually if you do use the dirt from someone you know in life, because you'll have a better connection to it. Or if it's someone you don't know personally, maybe they have something that you need, like if it's a famous writer and you're trying to write something, maybe you want to get dirt from someone who's an author.
Maybe what if it was an author who was a pedophile?
Maybe do your research before you dig around the author. Because some of it, yeah. Make sure you leave some sort of offering or token of appreciation when you leave. And you don't need to take a bucket of dirt. Often, seriously, a cup of dirt is plenty. So
yeah, don't be excessive.
And say thank you when you're done. I mean, seriously, just say thank you. It's amazing how much we can accomplish just by remembering our manners and saying please and thank you. But yeah, there's the graveyard dirt isn't necessarily a death magic kind of a thing, but it is kind of a macabre thing to think you're going to go and pick a bunch of stuff up, or dirt or bones or what have you, and use it in your magical rituals. So just be respectful. If you're going there with the intent to do something, and if the roles were reversed and you wouldn't like it, odds are pretty good that the spirit that you're talking to or trying to collect dirt from won't like it either. So anyways, so yeah, a little bit of the macabre on this Saturday night. So this is part 2 of the macabre. If you missed last night's show, by all means catch it on YouTube or in the archives on TFR. You can email me. It's wildpaisley@gmail.com. WILDEPAISLEY@gmail.com. Oh no, Naysay, did you call? Nope. Phone lines shouldn't be down. Sorry. The website is www.thespacesbetween.live. I'm working on it this weekend some more. So if there's not much content on there, I am sorry. And the Etsy shop is alive and kicking for the rest of the month. So thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. Good interaction in the chat rooms. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And sorry, Naysay, I didn't see a call, so I don't know if they're down or not. I know there's been some technical stuff going on the backside of that. So we will be back next week. Not sure what we're going to talk about yet, but I'll get it sorted. Make sure your intentions are set for the full moon and take advantage of the awesome energy. So merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. And I guess Duke is coming on next, so stay on TFR, and I'm not sure what he's talking about, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Thank you.
Lord, within the sun, as we will, so mote it be, the spell forever done.